it is Mac, even though you write under Marissa. Will you ever write under Mac, or is it just going to stay Marissa? Because I know your current works are underneath Marissa.
My next book, I might change it to Mac, but I didn't for A Sharp Endless Need because I named the character Mac before I changed my name to Mac. And I was like, I'm never going to beat the autofiction allegations this way.
I was curious when I was reading it, which I'll get to that question later because I do have that
Yeah.
question about A Sharp Endless Need. But I know that you have quite a few works published. You've got poetry, short stories, and then now some novels. Were all your poems self-published, Spending Minutes with You, Lost in Translation, and 3 a.m. Heartbreak?
Just one of them was self-published. I have a few other chapbooks too that are sort of out of print. They were with indie presses that 10 years ago, some of them sort of went under. But my one chapbook is still in print, Our Debatable Bodies. That was published in 2019 with Animal Heart Press. So that one is still kicking.
Got it. How did you get from writing poetry and short stories to writing a novel?
Yeah, so it was a pretty long process. Poetry's always been my first love. Ever since I was a kid, it was a safe place for me to express myself, especially with my queerness as a kid, coming to understanding that through adolescence. I would like write terrible rhyming poems in my notebook in middle school. And then I was a sad gay on Tumblr writing anonymous poems on there. I didn't have a formal education in any sort of writing or poetry, anything, but it was always a love of mine. It always felt like this is something I can turn to. When I graduated college, I played basketball in college and that was really my focus for my whole life. I always joke that I majored in basketball instead of what my major was. Writing took a way back seat, but once I graduated and lost high level basketball and had to sort of figure out what my next moves were and just what I love to do outside of that sport, writing started taking more of a center. So I was still like writing poems and whatnot, and I was trying to read more widely and be self taught. And I'd always wanted to write short stories and fiction. I just, again, was where do you begin? How do you teach yourself how to do these things? And I realized that literary journals existed. Like I'd never heard of a literary journal, which I take for granted now. I assume everyone knows what those are. It was the Paris Review and the New Yorker, obviously the big ones. I discovered all these cool online the journals that were publishing really cool, weird stuff. That opened my world up. I was like, these exist? Like I didn't even know this was a thing. And I started just reading all the short stories that I could, reading short story collections and again, sort of trying to be self-taught. I ended up taking craft classes online or workshops, but so much of it was how much can I read? How widely can I read? How much can I expose myself to all this different type of work? And I really just needed to give myself permission to
Yeah.
try and also permission to fail. So that was so much of it was that I was scared to get started and then I just started writing some short stories and submitting them to online journals and going through that slug of a process, which was just sometimes waiting a year for a rejection and whatnot and figuring out what works and doesn't work, my own work. Like, okay, why did they reject this? Or sometimes if they had feedback and building that thick skin of
Oh, yeah.
getting hundreds upon hundreds of rejections and being able to persevere in the face of those rejections was really key. So yeah, it was really just moving through genres and saying like, okay, I want to write something. And what happened with I Keep My Exoskeletons to Myself, my debut, was I did write it as a short story first. And I hadn't intended to make it a novel, but I was just sort of exploring. So I wrote a story and I was like, oh, I really like this concept. I really like these characters. And I found myself wanting to spend more time with them. So I was like, okay, maybe I should try to take this and expand it and make it into a novel. So that's how that shift happened.
Got it. That makes sense with what I read then, because that was the short story from 2019.
Yeah, I probably wrote it in 2018 or so, and that's when
Okay.
I started drafting the first draft of the novel. It was around that in 2018.
Got it. Which you then did publish as your debut novel in 2023. And you won the Lambda.
Yeah, yeah, the Lambda Literary Award for speculative fiction.
So can you talk a little bit more about that award?
Yeah, it's the like sort of major LGBTQ book awards. So they have tons of categories. There's like lesbian fiction, transgender fiction, trans memoir, da da da, and then they have speculative fiction as a genre. One of the awards. Your publisher submits you for these awards. They're the ones that are going out there and they're submitting your books. When we submitted to the Lambda Awards, though, we had to choose which category to go under. Would it be lesbian fiction or would it be speculative fiction? In this case, it fits some different categories. So we chose it for speculative fiction to be considered, and it won.
And you won. That's super exciting. How did
Yeah,
that feel?
amazing. I didn't go to the in-person ceremony. It was in New York. I have 2 kids and yeah, I have 2 kids. End of story. But I remember I was streaming it, like, you could stream it live on YouTube. They had it up. So I was just cooking dinner and I had the live stream up, and it was like 15 to 30 seconds behind. So I'm cooking. I see that they're gonna do speculative fiction, so I'm like, "Oh, don't get your hopes up, don't get your hopes up." And then I started seeing a million texts come up on my phone, and I
Yeah.
was like, "Oh shit, I either won or everyone's texting me like, 'Oh, you got robbed,'" and then the delayed announcement. And I was like, this is crazy. So my editor accepted the award for me at the ceremony, like on my behalf, which was great because they're my friend and they were such a lovely editor to work with on the book.
Yeah, that's super exciting. I'm very intrigued because it seems more fictional.
Which one seems more fictional?
The I keep my exoskeletons to myself. I believe I saw it was kind of like a dystopian per se.
Yeah, yeah.
And then A Sharp Endless Need seemed more,
It's like realism. Yeah, it's like
yeah.
literate.
Those are two very different topics.
I love speculative fiction. I read a lot of it. I love it as a way to write allegories, and I love it as a vehicle for social commentary of our world. So I keep my exoskeletons to myself as a dystopia, and it's a world in which prisons have been abolished, which we're told is a good thing because that is a thing that leftists and abolitionists are working for. But in its place, the president has instated this very harsh, shameful policy, sort of inspired by the Scarlet Letter. Did you ever have to read that in
I
school?
didn't, but it is on my list because I just finished The Handmaid's Tale, so I'm hoping to get to that one.
Okay, so she gets a scarlet letter A, and it's this mark of shame. It's for
Yeah.
adultery. And in my book, someone gets an extra shadow. And that's speculative aspect. Obviously, right? We can't do that in our world. For every crime they commit, so if you committed 5 crimes, you have this row of 5 extra shadows attached to your normal shadow. And it becomes this visual marker of number one, a warning to other people who might be like, oh, I don't want to get mixed
Yeah.
up with that person. And then also a shameful reminder to this person always of what they've done. So there's no healing, there's no growth. And these people with extra shadows are disenfranchised and oppressed and have less access to things that they need, healthy food and jobs and housing and whatnot. I've already said poetry is my first love. I guess speculative fiction is my second love then. So I just love it for the way that it can really critique our world. But I also never want to be pigeonholed into only a speculative writer, only a dystopian writer, only this. It feels for me like my career is going to be hopefully a long career of, for lack of a better word, doing whatever the fuck I want. I tell my agent that all the time. I just want to write whatever I want to write whenever I want to write it. I have a very stubborn streak when it comes to my creativity, but it's also like my stuff. That's what I want to do, what I want to do. So it's really just I get inspired and I have to chase the story down. And it doesn't matter what genre it is. Like I hope that I surprise myself for the rest of my life. I hope I come up with a western or with a fantasy. I want to be surprised by myself. That's exciting to me. Is what's a new thing that I can do that I haven't done? You're correct in that A Sharp Endless Need is much more autobiographical, which is why
Yeah.
I joked about the autofiction allegation. I needed a really long time to write that story. I need a long time as in I needed distance from myself, from my childhood and my basketball career. I couldn't write it when I was too close to it. I needed
Yeah.
the perspective of being 35 and having lived much more life past some of these events in order to fictionalize it. I didn't want to just write a memoir or write exactly what my life was. And I needed to have emotional and psychological distance from my adolescence before I could jump back in. So it's like inspired by my circumstances. I'm from Pennsylvania. I was in high school in the early aughts. I was a
Mm.
competitive basketball player. I was a closeted queer non-binary kid when I didn't even know the word non-binary existed. The facts of Mac mirror the facts of me, but they really quickly took over the book in ways that don't mirror my life. My
Mhm.
dad didn't die when I was in high school. That's not a spoiler. It's in the jacket copy. It's the first inciting incident that happens in the book. And so Mac's dealing with grief around that and grief around do you ever really know someone? Sort
Yeah.
of looking back on complicated people in your life, paired with the second sort of inciting incident slash impetus for plot, which also didn't happen to me, but is Liv, the love interest, transfers to Mac's school and they have this immediate chemistry and connection and intense, unspeakable thing beyond friendship that they can't really
Mhm.
name. And the rest of the book is grappling between those two things, the grief and being closeted and in love with someone that you play with. How do you express yourself? A lot of the book feels like a love letter to basketball for me. The ways in which you can communicate with your body through sport, that things that you maybe can't say, especially for these two people who are closeted and they're repressed and they're in a town where they can't be out and they can't express themselves. Like when they're hanging out together off the court, they really can't verbalize what they want to say. They talk
Yeah.
in circles, they talk through subtext, but on the court, whether it's practice or shooting around together or a game, it's almost like they come alive and they can express all the unexpressible through their body, through their chemistry, through the way they can read each other on the court. I don't know if you're a sports person, but I find a lot of beauty in it. There's a lot of poetry in sports. And it's like these micro moments of you can read what another person's going to do before they do it. That's a form of intimacy.
Mhm.
So Mac, this character is, dribbling up the court and knows that Liv is gonna cut over here and want to take the shot, whatever, whatever. So they have this really intimate connection that sort of gets put on display on the court in a way that's really interesting to me. Anyway, that's like such a long roundabout answer to your question. A story strikes me and I gotta write it, and it doesn't matter what genre it is or what the topic is gonna
Yeah.
be. I just have to chase it down because it won't leave me alone otherwise.
So, was a sharp endless need, which shout out to Neck Alley, and also thank you because you guys actually emailed me asking if I'd read and review it. I didn't see it, and I was like, oh, sure. And I did actually really enjoy it because I played basketball in middle school and freshman year of high school as well. I didn't continue with it because I liked theater, but either way, I get what you're talking about looking at someone and knowing what they're going to do and that intimacy between it. Where did the idea come from? Is it more just processing your childhood and everything? Because you said it has correlations to it, but at the same time, it's still a work of fiction.
I knew I wanted to write about the homoeroticism of sport, and I knew I wanted to write into the idea. It was something that I did experience multiple times in high school was a charged homoerotic friendship that was more than a friendship, but less than an overt romantic relationship. The one that you think about years later and look back on and go, huh, that might have been something. But in the moment, you don't, there's no word for this. And I've known a lot of queer people who have expressed this sort of same thing to me. Like I was in love with my best friend, or we used to cuddle at night and sometimes spoon and get jealous if each other kissed each other's boyfriends. It's like, that's not normal. Obviously, cutting with your friends can be fine and platonic, but the jealousy, like all of these things. And like, dude, that was a gay love. You were gay in love. And
Mhm.
people are like, oh shit. But it's such a weird space when there isn't really language for it. Even now, I call these people my pre girlfriends. I just made up a term because it felt like I was in relationships.
Yeah.
It felt like I had girlfriends. It's also obvious looking back, getting caught up in it when you're 15 or 16 or whatever. It's hard to look at closely or with any sort of perspective. So I was just really interested in how can I capture this idea. I had several of these, but Liv is sort of a combination of a bunch of people. She's not just one person I had a sort of relationship with. But just that idea is so interesting to me. And I think is really, I don't want to say universal, but a lot of queer people have been like, this is exactly the thing that happened to me. And so that was really the inspiration for it. How can I capture this on the page? And specifically, I want to capture it in the basketball space because basketball and my queerness cannot be disentangled. I came to my queerness through basketball always. Like all my first crushes were my teammates, my opponents, people in the sports world. So for me, they're intertwined. I'm not going to take this homoerotic thing and put it in a different space. I'm going to put it in the space that is familiar to me and that I can really do something with. I also, to be honest, I just want to see more sports in literary fiction. There's a lot of romance sports novels coming out in the past 6 or 7
Yes.
years. I think there is literary fiction out there that's sports, but it feels really limited. I wanted more and wanted to contribute more.
Yeah, and I feel like yours also focuses a lot more on the actual sport compared to sports romance doesn't really focus on the actual sport itself. It's just more of a plot in their story.
Yes, totally. And like, no shade for that.
No.
I did read, I'm not going to name names. It was just, I read a queer basketball book once years ago. And I was like, the words are wrong. The terminology for basketball is wrong, which I don't think would bother most readers because, again, it's about the romance. The
Yes.
basketball is sort of that background, which is totally fine. But I was like, this is funny. Why'd you want to write a basketball sport romance novel if you didn't at least look at the words? Again, no shade. Nobody's really reading for that. Um, but I was, and I wrote for that. I wanted to write a book that if you were a basketball player, were like, this is for me, especially a queer trans basketball player. There was a lot of conversation around should I explain terms? Should I use more layman terms or
Yeah.
things that a non basketball person would understand? And it was like, that's not the type of book this is. And Mac wouldn't talk like that. This is a story that Mac is telling 10, 15 years in the future. Mac's not going to dumb it down for whoever they're telling the story to. They're going to talk in the basketball terms. So that was an interesting conversation to have and think about as far as accessibility. But if Google exists, I'm writing for my people. If you don't know anything about basketball, that's totally fine. I also still think you'll love the book. If you
Hmm.
don't know what setting a screen is, that's fine. If you don't know what a rebound is, you'll still understand the heart of the book.
There's Google. To me, it's no different than reading a fantasy book. I always have to look up because I'm like, I don't know what this is. There's really no difference. You can look it up and still enjoy it while also enjoying the accuracy of everything. And like you said, being written from Mac's perspective, they would have been straightforward. There's no sugarcoating. Like, this is what I said.
And if you're going to be so lazy as to not just look it up, if you're from outside that culture, then that's sort of on you.
Absolutely.
And I love learning new things in fiction. Like I love reading fiction where I'm not quite sure what's happening and I have to do a little bit of research or I don't fully understand the history of something. That's part of reading to me. It's like, oh shit, I didn't even know about this thing. Let me read about it a bit.
I'm 100% there with you. So I did see that you started with I Keep My Exoskeletons to Myself with Catapult, and then
Yeah.
A Sharp Endless Need came with Dial Press. Is
Mhm.
there any specific reason why you have two different publishers?
Yeah, so Catapult's great. They were a really good fit for that book too. Catapult publishes a lot of queer stuff, a little bit boundary pushing stuff or experimental things. So they were a great home for that book to land, and my editor was incredible there. I'm gonna be frank because a lot of writers don't like to talk about it, but it's a money thing. We live in a capitalistic society, and I like to have frank, honest conversations about this stuff instead of pretending money doesn't exist. Catapult's an incredible publisher. I love them forever. I love all of their books. They're an indie press. They have less money to give for advances, and that's not their fault. I also wanted to get a two-book deal. So what happened with The Sharp Endless Need is we packaged it with a short story collection that I had almost entirely written, and we wanted to sell that as a package as a two-book deal. I wanted to be able to get a bigger advance in order to give me a little bit of breathing room.
Yeah,
Parenting, and I'm unemployed again for like the millionth time of my life. I wanted to have a bigger book deal and have a little bit of money. So that's really it. And I mean, as far as choosing them specifically, I did have some other options. I had some calls with some other big publishers as well. So Dial Press is under Penguin Random House. They're an imprint of them. I had some calls with others and I chose Dial specifically for the editor. She's incredible and she really saw the heart of the book and she also just works her ass off and is a great collaborator and we make a great team. So that's why I specifically went with them and made that jump. I edited A Sharp Endless Need with her and then also edited my forthcoming short story collection, which comes out next July, and that's called Perverts.
I'll be on the
Yeah.
lookout for that one. What is that going to be about? Can you describe that a little bit?
For sure, yeah. The unifying theme of the collection is queer and trans performance, and it's how we perform for each other in the community and then how we change and perform for people outside of the community. Different performances, facades, personas we put on for others, and then also shame plays another big role in it. I just can't get away from writing about shame. It's much more playful and darkly humorous than A Sharp Endless Need. It more so has the humor of Exoskeletons, even though that book is very heavy. There's more dark humor in it. And a lot of the stories are reimaginings of canonical stories. So there's a Peter Pan reimagining, there's a Magic School Bus reimagining, things like that.
Exciting. You said that you're currently unemployed. What do you do besides writing?
So I've worked in content marketing for the past 10 years, startups mostly, and agencies. People usually don't know what I mean when I say content marketing, but just content editor, manager, director of content, where we're just writing articles, blogs, website copy, email marketing copy,
Yeah.
all the stuff that goes into marketing. It's not my love or my pride and joy, but it's sort of all right. I have to do something with my ability to write. AI is sort of ruining all that too. So
Yeah. Yes, it is.
it's a little bit hard to find a job right now. If anybody's
Yeah.
watching and wants to hire me as, as a content editor.
So, is the eventual goal to be writing full time then?
God, I mean, that would be amazing, but I'm not sure that's possible in the current economy. I would love that. I would love the freedom of it, but I think I'd have to turn into Stephen King or something if that's the case. I mean, I would love if like I do some teaching, like I teach craft classes, I've been on faculty at some workshops, and I've done some freelance editing and manuscript consulting for people who have finished a novel and they want comprehensive feedbacks. I do a lot of stuff like that. If I'd be able to combine that all and make it writing, teaching, life, that would be great, but definitely not anytime soon unless I hit the jackpot.
Do you coach basketball at all since basketball is a huge part of your life?
No, I did after I graduated. I coached in college. I coached a D3 college and then at another school as well. And I've also coached AAU in high school, but I don't really have the time now. If my kids like decide they really want to play basketball, I might dive back into that. But it's so hard with the schedules because, of course, their
Mhm.
games are after school and in the evenings if that's prime parenting time.
Yeah.
I'm just chilling, waiting to see what my kids get into and what they like. A big thing for me is I don't want to force them to like something that I like. That never turns out well. And you see a lot of parents just, well, I love this thing, so like you need to do this. I try
Yeah.
really hard to stay like hands off. They know I love basketball and they know that I played, but I'm never like, do you want to sign up? I just wait for them to express interest and stuff. So I might have to coach soccer or some other thing like that. My wife played rugby for a million years, so she might turn into a rugby coach at some point 'cause my older kids are definitely interested in rugby.
That's exciting. Who knows?
Yeah,
Maybe
we'll see.
basketball will come.
Part of me is like, I don't want them to pick basketball, you know? I want to see what other beautiful thing comes to you. You know what I mean? You mentioned theater. I think my older kid will really like something like that. He's a performer who loves costumes. Let's just say
Oh,
that. Like a diva. He loves a costume. He loves to perform. So I'm like, I think you might like be a theater
yeah.
kid and that would be cool. Not something that I got to do because basketball took over my whole life. It was
Yes.
that thing and culturally we're starting to talk more about the ways in which we're like strangling children.
Yes.
You play this sport year round and you will win a scholarship and we will dump as much money as we can into traveling year round and then you can't do anything else. You can't have any other hobbies or any other interests. So that's my
Yeah.
diatribe. I want them to like dip their toes in everything in the way that I was so focused from a young age where I felt like I didn't get to try other stuff. Since I was like 7, I was like, I'm gonna go get a full scholarship and then I'm gonna play in the WNBA. And it was like my own drive, which is a good thing to have, but in so many ways was really limiting in scope.
That makes sense. So you're part of the LGBTQIA community. Why is it so important to see queer stories out into the world?
I mean, hell. I mean, there's your basic reason of kids all over need to see all these different stories that they exist. Because I didn't have that. I thought the only queer people were like Ellen DeGeneres and Rosie O'Donnell. I don't even understand that there are that many queer people out there, and I didn't even know you could be trans or that it was more than a punchline on like the front of trashy magazine. So much of it is just connection, exposure. A kid picking up a book somewhere and being like, oh, there's somebody who's felt like this before. James Baldwin has a famous quote that I'm going to butcher. You're the only person who thinks you've ever suffered until you pick up a book and read. And that quote, it's such a guiding light for me. We can be so isolated. The internet is now a thing, but pre-internet, there was just for me so much isolation, alienation, so much of do other people feel this way? Where would I find these people? And books become that space of opening up the world and showing you that other people have felt how you feel and that you're not alone. And that's powerful in and of itself. And especially now, just the fascist state that we live in and book banning and all of that. It's just extra important to keep having these books out there for people to access. I obviously talk a lot about kids, but whether you're a kid or whether you're 60 coming to your queerness or your transness, like you should always be able to access these things and find connection and community in a book. It's everything. If we're lucky, we live long lives and we should always be learning something new about ourselves. We're always changing and growing, whether it's coming to an identity or just learning something about yourself. I think that's really beautiful. And This is gonna seem like a plug, but I promise I didn't plan on dropping this, but my friend and his brother made a movie called If You Should Leave Before Me. It's not out to watch yet. They're at festivals with it. But it's a story of later in life gay men, and we don't really get many stories like that, and my friend had said that was the reason they made it, is you get a lot of coming of age queer stories or early mid-20s, but there aren't many that are late in life. It's
Yeah.
about 2 men in their 60s who have been lifelong lovers, and it was really interesting and beautiful to see. I got to see a private screening of it with people, and this is really powerful that this also exists because for so long there was the trope of kill your gays, that queer people don't live long lives, right? And especially trans people. But we do when we can, and we grow old with people or whatever the case may be, and we don't see those stories as much. So that was super enlightening.
Yeah. I mean, thankfully, we've got the technology, but also the whole AIDS epidemic and everything that happened with that. A lot of people weren't living longer lives, especially
Yeah,
within the gay community.
exactly. I mean, we missed out on a whole generation of elders.
So, you're a parent of two. How do you balance writing with being a parent?
That's the question, isn't it? That's the question on everybody's mind. It's tough. It also feels like something I'm familiar with, and as far as I've never had free time in my life. I'm gonna bring it back to basketball, but it really trained me for this, where every minute of my day was micromanaged. And if I have 30 free minutes, I know I can do something with them. In so many ways, parenting mirrors my athletic life of like, you've got this, and then you've got this, and then you've got this, and you have to find a way to balance your anatomy exam with traveling to go to your playoffs, and the balance feels familiar to me, even if it's a completely different context. But I've also had to adapt. For any parents who are like wondering the same thing, like the flexibility is everything. I used to wake up in the morning before work at 5, be able to like sit, draft or write or edit or whatever, and like have this routine. And every day I could get hours of writing done. But I don't get to do that anymore, and I
Yeah.
have to let that go. I can't be harping on that. I have to just find a different process.
Mhm.
With my kids, I write a lot of notes in my phone on the go or like cooking. I'll just come up with an idea, whether it's a big plot idea or it's something small or something I want someone to say in dialogue or a scene idea. I can just jot it down in my notes, move on with my day. When I finally do have 2 hours that I know I've set aside, I have all these notes. I have these things ready to go. I've been writing all along. That's what I tell myself anyway.
Yeah.
I'm always writing, even if it's just happening in my head and I'm working stuff out. It's a slower process, but it helps me be patient. I used to not have any patience. I used to just be rushing to the page. It's just different now, but it works. I'm working on a new novel now, and I started writing the whole novel in my notes app when my second kid was born. I'd be rocking him in the rocking chair in the middle of the night, like 1 a.m., and I would just start writing this novel on my phone while I was rocking him. That's the type of shit that I you gotta do if you wanna get it done.
Finding that time between that still works. You're still thinking about it, just putting it on the actual page later. So I just have one question left. What is a book or poem, since you said poetry is your first love, that changed your life?
We could do both.
I love it.
Well, I'll start with We the Animals by Justin Torres. It's my favorite book of all time. I say it all the time. I've read it probably 100 times. Honestly, like, not that hard to do because it's only 124 pages or something like that. Have you heard of it or read
I
it?
have not.
We the Animals came out in like 2011. It's just inspired so much of my writing. You ever just read a book where you're like, this person gets it? It's one of those unspeakable things. The language is beautiful. The story is incredible. It's really smart. It's really poetic. It's also really nuanced, which are always my favorite books are complex and nuanced. I feel like we're experiencing a little bit of a time period in which people are craving moral writing where everybody behaves perfectly on the page. And that's not possible, and that's not how we as people are. I say all that to say is it's a really beautiful family story, and it's also really brutal and violent in a lot of ways, but I read Justin Torres's like interviews about it, literally gobbled up every single interview he's ever had, I think, on the whole internet. And he talks about trying to create this story, and it's from the perspective of a young child and about parents who love you and love each other, but also that can be violent and can be painful. And these parents are extremely imperfect in a million ways. But he wanted to toe this line of nuance of how does a family have love and emotional and physical violence? How do those things sort of coexist? And it's the whole book is sort of asking that question. And it's also a queer coming of age story, but not very overt until we get to the end. I can't recommend it enough, and you can read it in an hour. Then I will just talk briefly about a poem that is probably my favorite poem ever, Meditations in an Emergency by Cameron Awkward Rich. It's in conversation with Frank O'Hara's original poem and collection by the same name, Meditations in an Emergency. So it's sort of an after poem or in conversation with Frank O'Hara. Can I read it? It's short. Can I
Yeah,
read it?
that's fine.
Okay. I wake up and it breaks my heart. I draw the blinds and the thrill of rain breaks my heart. I go outside. I ride the train, walk among the buildings, men in Monday suits, the flight of doves, the city of tents beneath the underpass, the huddled mass, old women hawking roses and children, all of them break my heart. There's a dream I have in which I love the world. I run from end to end like fingers through her hair. There are no borders, only wind. Like you, I was born. Like you, I was raised in the institution of dreaming. Hand on my heart, hand on my stupid heart.
I like it. Thank you for reading it.
For sure.
Thanks so much for doing this with me. I greatly appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It was a good time.
Yeah, well, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.